So today we're playing some Battlefield Bad Company 2, and I've been playing this quite a lot recently. I don't know why, I just kind of got into this sort of nostalgic comfort zone where playing Battlefield Bad Company 2 and Battlefield Bad Company 2 Vietnam just felt really good for some reason. So I decided to go back to it for a while and have a couple of games and just see what was going on. Now, it's really awesome to see that a game which is so incredibly old now, I think it's approaching nearly 6 or 7 odd years old, and it has such an active player base still. You can still find servers, you can still play online with people. It's really awesome to see, and this actually covers over to every platform. It's not just PC where this is happening. So, more specifically in this video today, I'm wanting to talk about Rush, because I feel as though Rush was like the cornerstone of Battlefield Bad Company 2. It was the reason most people played. It was, you know, something that when you think of Battlefield Bad Company 2, that is the first thing that comes to mind. And it got me thinking, what is it about Battlefield Bad Company 2 Rush that made it look so amazing and so intense, and kind of made the rest of the series look a little bit lackluster when it came to the game mode? So today I thought I'd go through that and just have a quick sort of step-by-step guide of things that I thought made it kind of special, and ultimately, you know, if we see these kind of elements again in the future, perhaps we might see Rush come back to the golden ages and kind of restore a little bit of faith in the game mode, because it's not as popular these days as Conquest Large, for example. So first and foremost, I think one of the biggest reasons for success for Battlefield Bad Company 2's Rush was kind of more revolving around the game itself. Now, I feel like if you played Battlefield Bad Company 2, perhaps it was your first Battlefield game. For me, it was about my second. But when you played that game, it was the first time, in my opinion, in an online multiplayer experience where I jumped into a game and everything just felt so surreal and intense. Like, everything from the graphics to the sound design that was so perfectly done. You jumped into this title and it surrounded you, engulfed you. It was really, really immersive. And I feel like that was really attributed to Rush quite a lot as well, because you find yourself in these intense gameplay situations where you're having a firefight down the street, or you're having an open tank battle in the middle of a road, but all the time you felt as though you as a player had some important role to play and you had to get that objective, and it felt very urgent despite the fact that there wasn't really anything telling you to do this. You could have just sat back and killed people on a hill, but that's not how the dynamic of Battlefield Bad Company 2 Rush worked. It was more a case of everybody run in, do the best you can, try and get these objectives, and everything kind of came together so nicely. The way, you know, the vehicles were put together, the way firefights were put together, and map design, that the intensity of the game mode felt really incredible, and it kind of encouraged you to play more, or want to win more. So I suppose that's something you could attribute more to the game as a whole. But in my experience, when the game first came out, it was just a case of everybody feeling so pumped up to play this game and, you know, really wanting to win, that made it such a really incredible experience, because there was never a game where you felt like you were bored, or a game where you felt like you kind of sat back. It was always, you know, you're in the mix or you're not. There was no looking at your phone, there was no reading text or whatever you do mid-game. It was, once Battlefield Bad Company 2 starts, you'll sit down, you'll play it, and, you know, you just kind of got lost in it. Now, the second one for me is variety, and this is more to do with map design and the way Bad Company 2 was designed in terms of multiplayer. Now, in my experience of playing video games, things can get really boring after a while, and we've seen that happen, but Bad Company 2 managed to avoid that for a very long period of time. Like I say, there's still people playing it today, and I feel like this was done more with the map design of Rush. Now, Bad Company 2 was one of the first games to kind of specify specific maps for specific modes. So you wouldn't be able to play a certain map on a certain mode. There was no accommodation for that. It was, this map is built for this mode, and that's how it is. Now, although this did somewhat limit the number of maps available, the fact that they were specifically designed for the game mode that they were playing meant that there was much more logical thinking into how these maps were going to play out and how things were going to work. Now, in more recent Battlefield titles, certain maps accommodate all different kinds of modes, which is good, but it hasn't kind of reached the sort of specified standard that Rush had on Battlefield Bad Company 2. And I feel a lot of people, when they played it, saw this variety take place, because if I played the same map in the same mode a couple of times on Bad Company 2, the same thing never really happened. And the reason that was because of the MCOM placements and the kind of vehicles that you could use to get to them, and the kind of gameplay that you could use to try and attack them. Now, in Bad Company 2, when you play Rush, there's no game which is the same, really. It doesn't happen that way. It doesn't pan out in a similar style. One time you'll be playing a team who's incredibly focused on getting their infantry onto the objective and, trying to get into close quarters combat situations. And other times, you'll play teams who will try and wear down the defenses using rocket launchers and vehicles from a distance. And then other times you'll get players who just decide they're going to go suicide in on buggies and Humvees and helicopters and just try and rush the objective as fast as physically possible. But the thing is that kind of dynamic always shifted up the game, because you never know who you're going to be up against. You're always going to be up against a different kind of player and a different kind of team. And that made it so much more different. Now, the way the MCOMs were designed in Battlefield Bad Company 2 is that the defensive team could essentially make an entire gridlock around these things. They could get into the buildings, they could get on the mounted weapons, they could get into really good spots and make it incredibly challenging for the attackers to get in. Likewise, the attackers had the option of finding the weaknesses within the defense. They had to find where was it in the defense that they could exploit. Maybe they weren't too good at defending aerial attacks, maybe they weren't too good at defending one specific flank, and once they finally worked that out, they could push down there, try and gain the objective. And because these pushes down these flanks or different exploitations of the defenses sometimes worked and sometimes didn't, things would shift up really quickly. If an attack failed, they'd have to try and find another route. If the attack was successful, the defenders had to adapt and try and defend their last MCOM, or maybe try and get this thing back and close off that defensive gap. And it just made for such a really dynamic playing field that I just don't think you see in a lot of games these days, let alone just a Battlefield franchise. And I feel as though that's a real credit to the map designers, who really kept things fresh for as long as possible and really just let the player try and figure out what they were going to do with a static field. They could change it up however they wanted to. They could destroy buildings to try and take down MCOMs. They could destroy buildings for their own advantage. They could literally do anything within these short spaces around the MCOMs, and I think that was something which to me made it incredibly special. And finally, Bad Company 2 as a whole, I think, had kind of a beautiful simplicity to it. And I know that sounds kind of weird, because you're probably just saying, well, that wasn't a simple game. But if you look at it in comparison to some more recent titles, there's just so much complexity in everything that goes on in them. You throw on some attachments and they'll completely change up the entire weapon themselves. They'll change the entire way you have to play the game. And there's so many different variables in vehicles and maps and things that you can do. Whereas in Battlefield Bad Company 2, they basically said, here's your stuff, play around with it, good luck. And I kind of like that. The most you could get with weapons was, the occasional grip, a sight, and that was about it. And it didn't really change a lot, it just gave you a cool sight to look through. And with tanks, there wasn't a lot you could really add to them or take away from them. They were just tanks. And whenever you faced somebody in a tank firefight, it wasn't about who had active protection on, it was about who was the better shot. And I feel like that's something that I just miss a lot of these days. Going back to Bad Company 2, everything was just so much more refined and simplistic, and I think that made it a lot more fun to just pick up and play and have a good time with. So guys, that's it for today's Battlefield Bad Company 2 video. Now, maybe you guys remember something from the game that you really appreciated, and if you do, put it down in the comments section below. And what do you think made Rush particularly special? Make sure you drop a like, and of course, if you're new here, make sure you hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys again in another video.